Hello, good afternoon. Again, video number 3 today. So yeah, I said video number 3 we're going to talk about a little bit about Russia, because they came out, it was either early this week or late last week, and said they weren't going to accept USD at any of their ports. And I don't know how much headline this made, but I don't think it made that much, which is hilarious because it's freaking Russia. You know, it's not like this is Vietnam or something, right? So for all of those people out there that are still kind of stuck in the USSR, Cold War visualization of Russia, they're all just sitting in their little wooden shacks drinking vodka and punching each other in the face, right? We have a very bad, we're like a terribly traveled nation, you know. General population just really doesn't know too much, including myself. I mean, I've only been to the islands in the Caribbean, obviously Canada, but haven't been that far. But, you know, there's a book out by Marin Katusa, who is, he's a Canadian out of Vancouver, and he runs a really large investment firm for private clients. So basically, if you're not going to give him $10 million, you know, he doesn't even talk to you. But he flies around all over the place looking at different projects, commodities projects, mining and precious metals, and goes to, you know, different exchanges. I mean, it's what he is. He's a global investment guru. And he's got a lot of money on the line for a lot of very, very wealthy people. So he tends to be on the up and up, and has a lot of private conversations with CEOs of companies and things like that. So he wrote a book called The Colder War, and it was basically about how Russia is going to own the petroleum and LNG industry for the next 50 years. And this was written, he wrote this 3 years ago. At least I got it 3 years ago. Maybe it was a year or two before that he actually wrote it and published it. But he brings up, you know, just so many things in that book that people don't even realize. And now we're seeing this dollar rejection starting to happen, not only by them but other countries as well. And you have Russia, Venezuela stopped accepting the dollar, right? And people think, Venezuela, whatever. Venezuela has a heck of a lot of crude oil. However, it is extraordinarily thick. So, and they've been so cash poor that they haven't been able to purchase, you know, if you're familiar with what's going on with Venezuela right now, it's a nightmare, right? They haven't been able to purchase the outside sourced oil that is much thinner, and they mix it that way they can refine it. If there's too many carbon atoms connected onto the crude you're pumping out of the ground, they can't refine it. It's like putting peanut butter through the system. So, you know, that is a premium. So it's cheap oil, but it's thick, and there's a reason it's cheap, because it's nasty stuff. Not as bad as tar sands, but, you know, to the same degree, it has to be mixed in with a rich oil. But Russia has basically taken over that industry for Venezuela as well. And they've got deals together where Russia's going to supply them with the proper oil to mix with theirs out of the ground. I don't know, obviously, what the terms are, but there's a few other things going on with Russia and their oil reserves and their alliances with other countries as well. And what's starting to form up is basically what OPEC has been for the last 40 years is going to be Russia and whatever the group of countries that are gonna, you know, entail that, you know, I don't know what the right word is it for, but, you know, so there'll be a group of countries that are going to lead. I'm sure Iran will be in there. Are going to lead the next 40 or 50 years of being the predominant global suppliers of petroleum products. And Russia's got vast reserves. Vast reserves. They haven't even started fracking in Russia. If they have, it's been very, 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 very little. They got massive LNG reserves. There's a lot of untapped Russian reserves for petroleum products. And it'll be very interesting to see how this new conglomerate of petroleum producers, how much they penetrate and how fast they penetrate the global supply chain. You're seeing where basically Europe has to give us the middle finger, because we've been, basically saying, you need to buy your LNG from us. But why would they do that when it costs, 50, 60, 70% more for them to get it from us than it does to have pipelines directly in from Ukraine, or somewhere through the, running the pipelines through Turkey. So you're really at a point now where geopolitically, China and Russia have played us like you wouldn't believe. And this is what happens when you have a country, that being our country, that has gotten so corrupt and so basically so riddled with fraud and the get rich quick mentality. There's been no vision of the future, and we've abused our power, and it's showing up now in the fact that the de-dollarization is certainly picking up steam. And nobody, why would China or Russia feel obligated to use our currency to purchase oil if they're not purchasing it from us? Obviously, if they want to get something from us, whether it's oil or any other product, it's reasonable for us to say, well, you need to, pay us with dollars. We don't want your currency, of course, right? It's, that shouldn't be a big deal or some kind of shocker. But the petrodollar system is really one of those systems that made no sense for any other country, but they haven't been able to do much about it because militarily we've been pretty capable of kicking anybody's ass in that front for a long time. However, that has proven lately to not be the fact anymore. We're way overextended militarily. We spend a lot of money on fighting wars rather than R&D. So when it comes to weapon technology, we are not the top dog anymore. Now, yes, we have more tanks, and we have more helicopters and fighter planes and aircraft carriers, and so we have more mass. We certainly have more mass than anybody else. But when you have really precision weaponry, they kind of can take some of that off the battlefield, or all of it off the battlefield in a hurry. So and I think that's been shown in Syria. We weren't able to take over Syria, and it's not because we didn't want to. We certainly did want Assad out of there, and that's a USD play. That's an expansion play. That's an oil play to keep the U.S. hegemony over the global petroleum trade. But we lost. We lost that war. And we lost our attempts to run the pipelines through Syria on our terms and get rid of Assad at the same time. Because we know this battle behind the scenes has been going on for a while, because they know that over there, obviously that's Russia's back door. And it's been pretty clear now for a little while, at least since 2008, 2010, that OPEC is not heading in the right direction. Now OPEC's just a mess. I mean, all the members of OPEC have been fighting like cats and dogs. They don't honor each other's agreements. And Saudis are running out of freaking oil. I mean, they're pumping over 90% water out of most of their wells. They would like to, they wanted to take out Qatar, steal some oil there. That was called off by Mr. Trump. And they're in trouble. Now, some of that's because we stole some of their money, and there's plenty of people that go into that, and I can't do that justice, so I'm not even gonna pretend. But basically, we've taken a lot of Saudi money, if not their gold as well. But research that a little bit. That's a pretty interesting dynamic. But yeah, the OPEC nations are falling apart. They don't have the pull that they used to. They said that possibly as of today, currently, that the Saudis are accepting RMB from China for oil purchases already, and they're just keeping it under wraps. They're not telling anybody about it, which I believe. I absolutely believe, because the Saudis need freaking capital. And you know, they've lived way beyond their means, and so many of the men in Saudi Arabia don't even have jobs because they just get like paid, you know, government, basically like a universal income that is ridiculous. You've got a lot of other people from other countries in there. It's basically like they're indentured servants, man. It's really weird. And then you've got you know, deals with Russia and China, which have basically they cut out the dollar a few years back. They've got a lot of energy for retail products. So Russia sends energy to China in whatever form, and then they receive shipments of your basic household goods, or, you know, manufacturing products that they might need for industry. So that's obviously been happening. But then obviously with the One Belt, One Road system going into place, the infrastructure, you know, all these contracts, the tens if not hundreds of billions of dollars of contracts that are going to go out with the One Belt, One Road system, none of those are going to be priced in USD, and that's going to be the largest growth on the globe for the next 30 years. It's going to be over there, and because we are pouting about it, we've gotten invitations to play in that party, many, but sometimes when you're top dog for so long, it doesn't go over easy that you're not going to be top dog anymore, right? You know, that you don't want somebody else. I'm not saying, you know, for us in the United States, we're going to all of a sudden become, you know, a third world country or something like that, but it's definitely going to be a dual universe where you have that region, you know, Russia, China, South Korea, probably Japan, even though Japan's still playing ball for the most part with the United States. That's going to, you know, that whole area is kind of going to be playing ball by a different set of rules that we can't dictate anymore, and that includes not using our currency, which I don't know what the side effects of that are going to be as far as how bad they're going to be, because the issue with the debt-based system, which is what we've ran off of since the early 70s, is that as soon as it stops expanding, it starts dying. You have to continually expand the debt across the globe, which a lot of these wars have been about. You have to find new vehicles and new areas to hide your debt, or get them to purchase debt. And if you cannot, those debt vehicles start coming to rest at home, which is when inflation starts to become a serious issue. And we are subsidizing a lot of treasuries coming back our way right now. And so far, so good for the most part, right? You know, none of us are spending $25 for a roll of toilet paper, but we also still have the majority of global trade is done in USD at this point. So, you know, are we contracting? You're starting down the backside of that hill. I don't know how fast that cascades into something larger, or how fast we start losing percentage points in terms of global trade using the USD. There's people out there that are a lot more qualified to speak on that than I am. I just know we're on the backside. We're not expanding anymore, which means we're dying. And with this clear relationship, and make no, you know, mistake about it, Russia and China are in bed together for a long time. You know, 2 years ago they signed like a 40-year energy contract. They're building the pipelines, they're building rails from all over the place, Shanghai to Moscow. I'm sure they're going to be connecting that in with Singapore somehow. Hong Kong's going to be tied in, and then they're going to probably extend that high-speed rail into Europe, which I'm sure is the next step. But you know, we're talking about the ability for massive amounts of commerce and business to take place and grow around these new, basically what would be associated to would be like a you know, modern day trade route that they would have, you know, from back in the day. Just think about it with all today's technology, right? So it's really they're playing ball by their own set of rules now over there, and we just don't know exactly where this leads. Do some people decide to put their pride away, as far as, you know, people that are in our government that are leading this nation, and get involved in some of this economic progress that's happened over there, so some U.S. companies can win some significant contracts and bring money back into this country through that route. What does it mean for, you know, the dollar index? You know, what will that end up being at? Will we get back into the 70s or worse as far as the dollar index is concerned? You know, loss of purchasing power on the dollar, you know, we've lost 11%, you know, not including inflation, right? Since the beginning of this year, I think we're down 11 points on the dollar. It rallied a little bit with the latest FOMC meeting, which, whatever, they can't shrink their balance sheet. So that is basically the biggest bunch of nonsense ever. If the Federal Reserve actually shrunk their balance sheets, the entire banking system would collapse within a matter of weeks. They cannot do it. It is impossible. They can say they're doing it, and they can show one set of books that makes it look like, you know, they're taking little pieces out of that, but they can't do it. It's impossible. It's not the way our system's built. So, in conjunction that with, you know, rising interest rates, you know, that dog doesn't hunt, right, as Rob Kirby would say. So yeah, that's all rhetoric, and quite frankly, I don't know who listens to the Fed anymore. I mean, obviously the, you know, gold and silver price still is dictated by what the hell that comes out of the Federal Reserve, but it really doesn't matter. Interesting, you know, obviously we need to do something about a trade deficit, because as we continue to lose, you know, USD usage globally, we gotta do something about our trade deficit, because the last thing we're gonna want to do is have to pay this debt, which we can't ever really pay, but, you know, at least at some point we won't be able to just say we're not paying any of it back. You know, we're gonna have to default. And a lot of people are going to be irritated about that. And I think, you know, most of these countries that we owe money to know that, you know, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that we have to default on the debt, because it can't be paid back. As long as we're top dog, we can continue expanding our debt. But if you take away the petrodollar status, global reserve currency status, and that debt's there, it's game over. You cannot, you know, any other country that's done anything similar to that hasn't been at least supported by the USD is been in a world of hurt. And it's just really interesting to see how they're going to get out of it. I know that in the past, history tends to tell us that war's next. You know, probably precursed by a global trade war, and then a continued global trade war that's going to heat up, because there's been one going on now for about 3 or 4 years, longer than that, but it's really starting to get, you know, it started to get hot and heavy since 2013, 2014, and that's just going to have to be a development that we watch and continue to see happen, you know, almost just like a snowball effect. And then, you know, history would tell us that at the end of that, if there's no natural resolution to anything, that the next thing is war, because that's, you know, big giant war is pretty much the only way to hit the reset button without admitting default, right? So, you know, those are just some things that I've been thinking about. Check out that book, though. It's a good book. It's a short read. I mean, it's like 150 pages or 180 pages, I don't know. But it's a really easy read. I read it in like 3 days. It's a good book called The Colder War. You can get it on Amazon. But, you know, it kind of helps anybody understand what's been happening in terms of global energy, which is really all that matters, right? You follow the money and the energy, and the rest of it is secondary to that. Because the world runs off of energy, runs off petroleum products, and it runs off the money that is predominantly used to purchase those products. But there's a lot of other factors, because you could put in like a reasonable timeline of trade war, escalation to trade war, and possible war, but there's so many other crazy things going on that you just don't know if there's going to be some kind of black swan event where a war is triggered sooner, or if a government fails or if for some reason somebody decides to just take down the system, you know, I don't know what these people are thinking at the top, right? We've been kicking the can. They certainly have found good ways to keep the system alive for a while, that's for sure. You know, the debt expansion by all countries, at least in the Western world, has been pretty phenomenal. And China's kind of said the same thing. They're like, well, if you guys are going to do this, we're going to do this. Now, one thing to remember with China is that they have very, very, very small amount of debt that's held outside of their country. So if they wanted to, they could wipe their debt off the face of the earth and back their currency with gold, and it would be like they never printed off that money in the first place. So the consequences for them wouldn't be great, but it'd be far less than it would be for somebody like us if we defaulted. You know, or France, or, you know, any other European countries mostly. Germany would be in a world of hurt because Germany holds a lot of other European countries' debt. But yeah, I think that's it for this video. Just a lot of crazy geopolitical things going on. You know, obviously, quick little tidbit on cryptos. Jamie Dimon's just been freaking out there bashing the hell out of all of it, and Jamie Dimon is playing a role, right? If Jamie Dimon's on TV and says it's terrible and it's a fraud, it keeps people from investing in it. I tend to be of the theory, as well as others are, that they don't want this thing going too high too quick, because the world is hungry for an alternative to yield outside of just hungry for an alternative currency other than the paper crap that is floating out there today. So without them doing kind of these coordinated efforts to keep the price down and keep people out of the market psychologically, you know, Bitcoin would be $20,000 by the end of the year. And, you know, they can't price themselves or other people out of it too quickly if it in fact, sorry, another weird noise I heard. I don't think it was my truck. I think it was that truck that passed me. They can't allow it to go too fast. They can't price people out of it, because then it does become an issue, right? If all of a sudden by this time next year Bitcoin's $150,000 a Bitcoin, now we've kind of got some problems with utilization, because things can't get too big too quick. Now don't get me wrong, I love that. I go out and buy a house, and I already own a house, but so I don't know, maybe that's not a true statement. I don't know what I'd do. Not that I have that many Bitcoin. I tend to like some of the other currencies better, but yeah, it's just you know, this whole Jamie Dimon has 100 traders committed to the cryptocurrencies, if not more. I mean, he's got an entire trading you know, little organization inside JP Morgan that is dedicated to these things. They even tried to create their own, which failed miserably, because who the hell wants to own a cryptocurrency that's run by a bank? That defeats the purpose, right? They already run our world. We don't need them running a cryptocurrency as well. But yeah, don't be fooled by it. It's definitely a psychological thing. They want people to kind of second guess, you know, whether they should buy it. You know, people always see, it doesn't matter, you know, Bitcoin was in a bubble at 600, and it was in a bubble at 1,000, it was a bubble at 2,000, and a bubble at 5,000. Now it's back down to, well, I never got to 5,000, I got to 4,900 and change, but now it's about 3,600, and you know, they've been beating the shit out of it for the last week and a half. So I wouldn't let that deter you. Even if you're listening to anything Jamie Dimon says anyway, you should do the opposite, right? So he's one of the great criminals of our time. More money's been laundered through JP Morgan than probably any other institution on the planet, other than maybe Goldman Sachs. But yeah, do the opposite of what those guys say.